Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. The time now is 2:25 p.m. As a reminder, please note that this audit committee meeting is being recorded for the convenience of those unable to attend. Aday, can you please call roll?
Yes, John Madrick,
Present.
Frank Cirabella.
Present.
Karen Apollon. Present. Serena Scott and Russell Buckley. Tom Shepard, Anthony Giordano,
Present.
Gregory Faulkner. Alan Ong,
It's online, I think.
Alan Ong,
Yes, present, right here, sorry.
and Alison Hirsch.
Thank you, Aday. We have a quorum. The first order of business is agenda item number 2, noting the minutes of the audit committee of BERS held on September 26th, 2023. The minutes have been previously provided to the committee via the SharePoint site and are also included in your packets. May I have a motion to consider the minutes from the September 26th committee meeting?
So moved.
Tony, in a second. Second from Kareem. Thank you so much. Please raise your hand if you vote to approve the minutes. Aye.
Affirmation.
Please raise your hand if you do not approve the minutes. Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda.
Now, the presence of the controller's rep.
Oh, yes, controller's rep is here. Mr. Dorsa.
Thank you for noting that.
Pleasure to be with you.
Please, Al.
No, that's not true.
Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 3, the executive director's update. Sandy, would you like to share any remarks with us?
Well, just to thank you for attending. We will be rolling into a board meeting later this afternoon, and we will need volunteers for the audit committee for the following year, so please consider re-volunteering. This is an important effort. We are managing audits from DFS, controller, Grant Thornton, and our internal audit staff. So staff is very busy and making great progress on these projects, and they all help our improvements in terms of operating efficiency and administrative responsiveness to members. So please volunteer again this afternoon. We'll find you.
Thank you, Sandy. Next item on the agenda is agenda item number 4, the internal audit director's update. Okay,
All right, so on today's agenda, I'm gonna go over the audits completed since the last audit committee meeting, ongoing audits, an update on the status of audit findings from prior audits, and then I will close with a high-level overview of our internal audit plan and the results of the most recent risk assessment. All right, so jumping right in, the first audit we're covering today is the payroll procedures audit. Just to give some background here, this is an annual audit that we conduct based on the Controller's Directive 13. It requires us to review at least once a year all aspects of payroll procedures. The processes covered under payroll procedures are personnel, timekeeping, payroll, and distribution. And based on the fact that BERS HR is only responsible for aspects of these processes, we usually will tailor our audit to the areas that BERS HR is responsible for. So this cycle, our objective was to assess compliance with Directive 13 and also to assess controls around selected personnel actions. And we did this in order to determine the operational effectiveness of controls around those processes. This audit was reported out in October of 2023, and the scope was July 2021 to March 2023. So there are 4 findings that came out of this audit. The first one had to do with overtime approvals, as well as the overtime policy in place. So we reviewed employee timesheets to determine if overtime worked, was properly recorded, and compensated in accordance with requirements of Directive 13 and the overtime policy that was in place during the scope period. So for our audit testing here, we sampled 47 overtime records, And of those 47, 27 were fine. There were no issues there. But for 20, there was, discrepancies like human error in time entry. We noted some unapproved records. And in 2 instances, we noted that the time records were completely missing. This was because those employees were no longer working for BERS at the time that we pulled the records. So we did make a recommendation there to ensure that those records are retrieved while they're still available. We also reviewed the employee handbook as far as the requirements for overtime. And then we compared that with the BERS overtime policy, and we noted a discrepancy there. So while the employee handbook requires written approval before overtime is worked, the overtime policy does not require prior approval. The effects of of having both policies not comport is that there could be confusion when it comes to compensating for overtime. If there are any disputes as far as approvals and things like that. So we recommended that both documents be reconciled so that they're consistent. And then we also recommended that BERS do a comprehensive review and look back of prior overtime records to determine whether any corrective action was needed and any employees needed to be compensated for the time that they had previously worked. So as far as HR's response, they're going to do a look back of prior overtime records, and they plan to do that by June of this year. And then they're also going to work with the legal team and the executive office to review and update the employee handbook and the overtime policy so that both documents comport. And that should be completed by June of next year. So finding number 2 had to do with, this was a repeat test actually from the last payroll procedures audit, where we were looking at employee salaries to determine if they were within the DCAS ranges. So for this test, we looked at 146 records that were active at the time, and we noted that 5 those records had surpassed the DCAS salary ranges by anywhere from $200 plus to $2,000 plus. We did not observe any instances where salaries were below DCAS ranges. So our recommendation here was for BERS to take into account any contractual agreements that will increase employee salaries when discretionary raises are being considered. And we recommended that because we found a direct correlation between those who were over the range and those who had received discretionary raises. And we did make clear that the goal was not to discourage discretionary raises or merit raises where they should be given, but just to take into account that those raises could push the employees over the DCAS range.
What does DCAS stand for? I don't know.
Oh, Department of Citywide Administrative Services.
I just got a question about that. So is it that they're in the pay is in the next title? Or are they capped out of the title that they're in? Because those ranges are like, the DCAS ranges are like, you drive a Mack truck through, right? So is it just that they're in the next, like, they're getting paid an administrator's title, but they have an associate's title?
No,
Is that
so
what it is?
within their title, they
Yeah.
would have a range, and that range usually will increase based on the union agreements, right? So when we were testing, we're comparing their salaries on a particular date with what the range was on that date.
They were over?
A few of them were over, 5. Well, not too many considering it was 146.
Is there a regular evaluation process for regular merit increases?
We have not looked at that process, so I cannot speak to.
There's no systematic review for, we're not allowed to give performance increases. We are allowed to, under DCAS rules, give increases for increases in responsibilities. So the way we operate it, and we've tried to true up with DCAS as much as possible over the last 8 years. So if someone is going to get a discretionary raise, there's a direct correlation to a job description, increase in the job description. We file it with DCAS, we get it rated, we get it approved. and we give the increase.
So that's the definition for discretionary, because I have some concerns about what we're calling discretionary.
Yeah.
Because to whose discretion, right? And that's where you see a lot of times that there's pay inequities, right? Because if everybody's not capable, not capable, if everybody doesn't have the ability to get an evaluation increase, which is citywide, when we say discretionary, that's where we see the pay parity or disparity around what's happening with discretionary and who's discretion, right?
You're right. I think discretionary is the wrong word using here for this. It's not discretion on if I like someone or not. It's discretion on if the role has increased, like Stanley has stated. So it's not discretionary in that just for any reason. It's usually based upon a role being increased, and that comes from the supervisor of the unit to the director to Sandy.
Okay, and so so is it the same as a promotion?
Yes, it's usually a level 1, level 2, et cetera. That's
Yeah,
right.
it's a change in job responsibility.
Yeah.
Generally increase job responsibility.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say most of the folks are in the title. Do you have a lot of people on leave from one title for the next title? And would that satisfy the ranges, meaning that you're on leave from your underlying civil service title and get paid because my understanding of the Long Beach decision is as long as they've attained one test, it counts in the Long Beach as the 80%, right? The 80-20. Like I'm just trying to understand if that's what if you have that or you don't have that. And if I'm getting in the weeds, I can have this offline with Sandy.
Because I'm not there with you.
Yeah.
Well, we could bring in Michelle or Sinead to respond to that.
I mean, it's not a pressing question. I was just curious if like.
And I would add, there are 2 reasons why we might do a systematic review of this. Every 6 months or so, I ask HR to do like a cross responsibility analysis, deputies, supervisors, staff members, to see that odd pay inequities don't develop. And periodically, so recently, we put a floor on director's pay. Because what we found is, as we were adding directors and had to pay up for certain staff members, there were some definite inequities being developed, and we rationalize that by putting a floor on director's pay. We look at that periodically, and the trigger is often, we just hired someone into a job. You know, they have set the market rate of what is fair for that job through the DCAS process, and we reevaluate anyone else in the job position.
And when you say reevaluate, does that mean that you could potentially adjust their salaries in the reevaluation without the incremental responsibility?
Not necessarily, no. But we evaluate the responsibilities also.
I just want to clarify that discretionary here is other than contractual reasons.
Right.
So HR's response was that they are attributing this to a system update lag, and that they will reach out to the system to the responsible parties for the system whenever the issue comes up again. So finding number 3 has to do with approval documentation for salary increases. So we reviewed all salary increases that occurred between July 2022 and March 2023, and we wanted to determine whether they were properly approved and supported by documentation. We looked at 10 records for this test, and we know that in one instance that a salary increase that was previously approved in writing was subsequently adjusted, and that subsequent adjustment wasn't in writing process. So we flagged that.
That was my verbal approval. We amended that with an email upon recognition of the fact that we failed to do it historically.
And the concern here is that BERS may not be able to demonstrate that the approval was done according to policy and procedure in instances where that documentation is not in place. So we recommended that there be written approval as well as instances of salary adjustments. And then we also recommended that BERS considers using a digital platform in requesting and approving increases. Management's response here was that, since FY24, they've been requiring written requests and approvals for managers who are requesting increases, and that they also will get a written approval from fiscal ops before those increases are processed. However, when it comes to using a digital platform, they will not be doing that at this time for a couple of reasons. So they are not, they're concerned that it will slow down the process, and also concerned that the volume of increases in the process may not justify use of a platform. Such as
I pushed back against this personally. I thought it was overly complicated, to be honest. We use a series of email approvals, which are documented. Chitra has to approve that it's within the budget, and HR has to approve that it's within DCAS limits.
And this is all these increases are tied to what you're calling the discretionary for increased responsibility.
Yes.
And how often is that happening? It sounds like that's a large volume.
Not that often. How many last year?
So we had 10 that we tested in the scope. I would have to look to see if that was 100% of the population.
There weren't a lot.
It wasn't a lot if we only.
I mean, it just feels like, that there's a lot of this happening, and, the fact that you're even auditing any.
There's not.
There's far more hiring going on than retroactive compensation changes.
Just as a corollary, when there's contractual change, how does that happen? Does that just go across the board?
Yes.
Automatically implemented?
Well, there's budgeting involved, and the processing actually is handled by the DOE.
Rely on DOE for payroll.
Okay, got it.
So
What's 1408 is the big union here, or is it CWA and?
1407.
combination? Sorry, 1407 is what organization is the majority of the folks? You have CWA too, or?
CWA.
Like admins? I'm just curious if it's
I think it's,
29?
To be honest,
it should be 1407,
1407?
1407, DC 37.
Well, I mean, just saying that's easier if it's one, if there's one bargaining agreement that's like 90% of staff, that's fantastic. That's better for operationally. It's not creating disproportion every 6 months when he's waiting for the second union to negotiate a contract. That's why I was just,
Yeah,
and we had to have that conversation with some people. Yes.
okay, fair.
Yeah, it's coming. Yeah, I know your neighbor got it, but it's coming.
So lastly, the last finding here is regarding unapproved timesheets. So this is also a test that we repeat, and we're reviewing timesheets within the scope to make sure that they were properly approved and by authorized approvals. So this cycle covered a 2-year period, and we noted 2,500 plus unapproved time records. Compared to the prior audit, this was a slight improvement, but it indicates that the issue is still persistent. Effect of this would be impact to employees' pay, especially overtime pay. And the big one would be managerial entitlement service. It's recommended that HR conduct periodic training and also develop a process for escalating repeat offenders to senior management. HR's response is that they have a plan to conduct trainings for staff and managers, and that they will escalate to the executive office when needed. They also have an ongoing campaign where they email all the approvers every 2 weeks to remind them to approve time and just list out what the dangers are when time is unapproved. So we just encourage that they, continue with that.
Is it true that Janine now monitors this on a bi-weekly basis?
I think she pulls quarterly reports, but they send out an email every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Reminding folks.
Do you guys not use CyberShift like DOE?
We do.
And I understand that CyberShift requires approval by your manager before it can be processed. Is that a different process?
Well,
No.
when the approval is not there, it doesn't stop the employee's paycheck, right? So the effect is not immediately felt unless there's overtime involved. So there's a tendency for it to just. All right, so are there any other questions before? So second audit here is the QPP refunds audit. So when members separate from service, depending on the years of service that they have, they may be eligible to a refund. And that would be one of the main streams of QPP refund. And then members might also be entitled to a refund of payment. Now, although the majority of refunds are processed in the benefits module that requires 2 individuals for processing, there are instances where manual refunds are necessary. Now, as far as the objectives of this audit, we wanted to review the QPP refunds process to determine whether transactions were properly approved, processed, and supported. And we also wanted to determine compliance with any applicable program regulations. The audit period covered here was February 2021 through February 2023. And we came out of this one with 4 findings. And before I go into the details of the findings, I just wanted to mention that the common theme with findings had to do with CPMS issues and not necessarily with the processing per se. But finding number 1 has to do with CPMS data reliability and performance. So there is inaccurate data in CPMS for a variety of reasons. Legacy data conversion, the payroll data that we get from covered employers and third parties, and also some human error in data entry. BERS has had data cleanup projects to alleviate the issue over time, but due to the nature of the converted data, some of them will just have to exist until there's a reason to go into the member's account, like separation or refund.
These data problems will exist until the last 3 CPMS members retire, because there's 40 years of corrupted data from the interaction of payroll and prudential. And there's nothing we can do about it and correct it as we go.
Just for clarification, what is CPMS?
Comprehensive Pension Management System. That's our system of record.
And
VITEC.
this doesn't just affect you guys, it affects the members as well, right? And certainly in the DOE.
Yes.
This is a legacy system that
No. This is the replacement system.
this is the replacement system.
The
But-
replacement system
But
is
the
problematic.
data has been brought over. from
40
the-
years of prudential
Okay.
data, which we found to be riddled with error.
Garbage in, garbage out, regardless
Yeah.
of the system. Yeah.
It's one of the reasons.
It's not just that. The old data was a monthly batch system. It was not broken out on any contributions or deductions. It was all in one lump sum. And the system went in effect in 1970 at BERS, but it was created in 65. So it was very, very problematic to try to cleanse that for 40 plus years. As Sandy is saying, it was a very, very complex endeavor. So it's not CPMS per se, it's the data that we had or didn't have with the old system, and data with the city itself, because most of the cities does not use historical data besides the pension funds. So they're not really concerned a lot about the consistency of the data across the member's whole career. We've seen people that have pay dates before they're putting the start date from the city. It's been a mess across the board.
Thanks, Daniel.
What's our exposure?
Well, so we responded to this by doing 2 things. One, creating QA unit, which manages the data flows in, identifies those errors, corrects them, and then feeds back to the supplying agency those corrections. Unfortunately, the supplying agencies generally ignore our feedback, so they have a continually increasing number of errors that they are correcting on every payroll file submission. And then we have a department which is trying to get ahead of the old data by doing audits of the old data before a retiree presents themselves to counseling for retirement. So we're trying to clean up as the the frontier of retirees hits us, and trying to clean up the new data as it gets submitted to CPMS.
For
So-
more context, it took 8 years just to get to the point where data was consistent. It's
Yeah.
very labor and time consuming. So it's not worth the effort right now on an individual member basis to correct the data until they're near retirement. You just don't have the manpower to do that. It's very complex.
Okay,
Yes.
so what's happening is, so I hear what you're saying, Daniel, and I'm just confirming. You don't have the capacity to go out and revamp and fix it all. So at each interval where somebody is retiring, you're addressing it at that moment.
Or near
That's the
retirement.
situation.
Close, we're
Yes.
trying to get out a month or two ahead of them.
Okay.
So it's.
And I know somebody right now who's been out of the system for, and I'll fault with you on that, Daniel, I want to say going on her third year and still hasn't got her money.
Yep. No.
That's
Wait,
outrageous.
that shouldn't be the data issue, 3 years. Let's talk about that offline. That sounds really out of bounds.
Yeah, we're getting a lot better to getting that first check out in 30 days. So yeah, we should focus on that case.
Yeah, and maybe it's not you guys, but I know it's, she was,
Yeah, yeah.
principal and, was she a principal? Maybe it's not you guys.
No,
Right,
principal's
we
not
don't do
us.
principals.
One of the principals.
I think she's a principal.
Okay.
Let me find out. But I know, yeah, because
Well,
I was supposed to follow what you did.
we do favors for Patricia Riley at TRS. So if you want us to put a little pressure on them, happy to
Yeah,
do it.
I just hear a lot of horror stories
Yeah.
about exactly this. And now being on the inside, this explains so
Oh, to your
much.
point, Corinne, the biggest complaint we get from members is that when they look online, member self-service, their membership time is not accurate. We try to explain to them over and over and over again. We will fix it before you retire, but they want to see it accurate right now. But
Yeah.
it's really, someone that's 20 years from retirement, to fix it now, it's really not, out.
If somebody catches it, you fix it now, could it not be corrected now and on a go-forward basis be correct? Rather than
It could be, but
Right.
because we have members coming for counseling, for estimates, those members are the priority, the ones that are 5 years out from
Gotcha.
retirement. So a year and a half ago, we created a service review unit to actually do this. And then working backwards now for folks that are near retirement. And as they improve, it'll go further and further and further out to younger and younger members.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Dan on that. I see this at other systems where the backlog gets created by people that are 15 years from
I
retirement.
understand, that
That
makes
that
sense.
wanna,
Wanna come in and
that
talk.
they wanna come in and talk, and we got, the people in the waiting room that are ready to go
That makes sense.
It's not really.
Triage.
So.
It's a
But I gotta
triage.
tell you, I'm one of those people, if that was me, I'd be looking at it like, yeah, no, you gotta fix mine now. I'm not waiting on that, because anything can happen between now and then, God forbid, I drop dead and you guys don't give my family what they would act like I would be that person. So I wonder about, the approach makes sense, right? To address those that are most timely. But if you have somebody, I wonder about those who catch it early, does it take away the need to go all the way back 20 years if I caught it in advance?
There's no pension if you die on the job.
Well, whatever, there's some benefit my family gets, right? Well, I ain't dying then,
No, yeah, no.
So I will say that at separation, whether it's retirement or refund, they will usually go back to the entire employment history and retrieve all those records and verify, make sure everything is clean before processing.
So what you're saying is it's not just this system.
Yeah, it's, yes. And it has more to do with a population wanting, I will say this, younger, less people with less years in the workforce want stuff now.
I want to see what they're gonna get.
Whereas the,
That I should say.
the folks that are getting closer need it now.
Yeah, I got it.
And to further compound the issue, make SPERS more complex, we have part-time members
That's right.
and Prudential didn't aggregate the time when they actually worked year by year. It was just lump sums when they got it. So that we have to actually go back and match that time to an actual pay period. And that's not how the data was captured 20, 10, 30 years ago in that system.
I'm going to be a dead horse, but this is outrageous that we couldn't just buy an off-the-shelf system.
No, it's not this, that was the old system that was off the shelf. It was just here way too long.
And
And it wasn't-
we have a lot of that.
Wasn't necessarily Prudential's fault. They were just taking the data. There was no one checking the data was accurate, which is why we now have a QA department. There was, they were just accepting the payroll data and compounding the errors.
So if there was an error in payroll, you got an error in the data. If there was, somebody didn't get paid off.
This has been cited by our external auditors regularly, and their comment is usually, we understand there's a data problem. You should tell them to fix the data. And our response is, yeah, we tell them every couple of weeks.
I'm surprised you haven't had more lawsuits on your hands. This kind of thing.
Because we fix it. Yeah, we fix it.
All right, so some of the impact of these data issues is that when processing refunds, the staff have to do double, triple checks against various payroll systems to make sure that the data that they're using is correct. And then when it comes to performance, they did let us know that they sometimes experience system crashing, freezing, to the point where the data that they've inputted gets lost and they have to start over. Or every now and then a workflow that should be created is lost. I should note that at the time of reporting, there were around 473 tickets pending with Vitech for system improvements and bug fixes. So we recommended that the data cleanup continue, don't give up. It's been ongoing. It was ongoing for a while, and we just encourage that they continue. We also recommended that the staff, as much as possible, document the issues that they identify, and also document the workarounds that they're using frequently to ensure that control activities are being consistently performed. And then we also recommended periodic reviews of the tickets that are outstanding so that they are reprioritized for Vitech.
That's another quick question. Are you guys tracking the corrections that you're making as people are retiring? Like, is there like a report?
Data.
Yeah, the data report.
changes.
Yeah. And a report that said, I mean, when you hear something like this, I'll say on this board, I hear something like this, the first thing I want to know is, I hear what you're doing, the approach makes sense to me, but how are you tracking and monitoring that?
That'd be in the specific member part account.
No,
I
but,
mean, it's,
sorry,
it
can I
should be-
interrupt, please?
ahead.
This service review unit keeps a record of the part account the way it was before the correction and a copy of the part account as corrected. So they keep records of all of the cases that they overhaul.
So my question is there a way to extract that information in a report that says in 2020, fiscal year 2022, BERS was able to, retire X number of people, data reported fixed and blah, blah, blah. Because when you see something like this, right, and you're doing this on a constant basis, the answer is, here's what we're doing and here's how it results on an annual basis, of the I don't know if I would call it success, but of the resolution.
So we track. I'm not exactly sure about that question, but we track every transaction here. And we run monthly reports of the numbers of those transactions, right down to the individual who was responsible. We report that out to directors, deputy directors, and supervisors for management. That's done by our data analytics department. And that is, it's a extraordinarily detailed report. Whether we track that specific data flow, I'm not sure, but we do report out on all other transactions. I'll check on that.
Sandy, we can discuss this with David, but I'm almost certain the answer has to be yes.
Yeah, I can't believe it's not in there.
Yeah, he can search for pretty much anything. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very comprehensive. Matter of fact, if you're interested, I can share the most recent report. It's graphical, it's colorful, it's actually extraordinarily helpful for us to track and identify.
It's more this idea of this is an audit and it has to be some kind of corrective plan.
Yeah.
And in that corrective plan, that to me would, here's what we do and here's why, and here's the report that shows that on an annual basis.
Yeah.
That aggregated data becomes the answer to the finding.
That's right. That's what I'm
And
saying.
it breaks it down by, right down to the individual.
I mean, an audit's not worth anything if you're not doing anything to address the finding, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we're tracking all that.
And so management's response here is that they will continue reporting and documenting and supporting the CPMS team with the information that they need to, do these corrections. So finding number 2 speaks to residual balances. So there are certain transactions, certain refund transactions that will automatically close an account or end a membership. And for those transactions, the expectation is that there's a zero balance after they're processed. So we did look at the entire population of refunds within the scope period, and roughly 45% of those transactions that should have had a zero balance had residual balances in the account. We brought this to the attention of the department, and this is an issue that they're already aware of and have reported to Vitech. So we recommended that we prioritize, remedying this issue in CPMS due to the high volume and also due to the potential for communicating inaccurate information to members and outside of the organization.
Did you cite the average balance that's residual? It's,
It was from negative to a few cents to as much as, I think, $5,000, if I'm not mistaken. We also recommended post-processing reviews and spot checks. So after, periodically after refunds are processed, we recommend that they go back and take a look at those accounts to make sure that closing transactions were properly posted. So management said that they will identify the accounts with residual balances going back to 2020, and they will have those corrected. Finding number 3 has to do with manual refunds and segregation of duties. So like I said at the beginning of this, the traditional refund processing is done through the benefits module and requires at least 2 individuals to process. But for manual refunds, even though it's still done in CPMS, it's done in a separate module that does not require that separation. So in essence, one individual is able to process a manual refund. The department does rely on email approval and note to file as a control. But as we pointed out, since these are not system controls, they are able to be circumvented by a bad actor. So we recommended that, that the department reaches out to VITEC and, try to see about having those controls implemented in the system, which they did, and they started the initial conversations. I believe that I was copied on the email where this request was made, and they are going to have discussions to prioritize that. They have a lot of tickets and bug fixes queued up, so it's a matter of priority. Yeah, this was
450.
yeah.
About 360.
yeah, perfect. It got put off by our Roth priority.
And then lastly, we noted some issues with the refund letter. So whenever a refund is processed, the member is issued a letter that has the information on the refund. So, refund, the amount refunded, taxable amount, taxes withheld, and all of that key information is on the letter. We did note that in all the letters for refunds, the signature is that of a director that hasn't been in charge of operations for several years. We also noted some system issues with the letters where refund amounts were somewhat incorrect, or there were some formatting issues or blank spacing. And in one case, there was no refund letter. So we recommended that the staff ensure that the signature on the letter is that of a manager that is responsible for the process, because it indicates that this individual is responsible for the contents of the letter and the accuracy of those contents. So having the name of someone else is not the best practice. And then we also recommended that the signatures that are saved in CPMS be reviewed at least annually and when there's a staffing change. And then we also recommended that the other issues impacting refund letters be reported to VITEC. So management's response here is that they will request the updated letters. It's not something that they're able to do on their own, so it has to go through VITEC. And then the other issues as well will be queued up to VITEC. So are there any questions on this audit before? So this is just a slide that shows the audits that are currently happening at NYCBERS. We have a couple of internal audits going in, the member self-service, cybersecurity audit, where we're reviewing in place for the MSS portal. The MSS portal is where the members are able to log on and view their account balances and submit a request for certain transactions. We're also looking at participant account adjustments. Here we're looking at sort of corrections that are made to member accounts when there are errors or issues that need to be fixed. We are also looking at dormant accounts. Now, this came about as a result of the last DFS audit where they had identified about 33 plus million in dormant accounts. So we're taking a look at that process to see how these accounts are being managed. And then from an external perspective, so we have these three external audits ongoing. We actually had the annual fiscal year audit for 2023. That's not included on the list because it was already reported to the board in December. But currently we have an audit that's being performed by the Controller's Office. This has been going on. It was actually kicked off in December of 2022. I've just had a request today for more information, so it's still ongoing. DFS, Department of Financial Services, they started this audit with us in 2019. It was wrapped up, I believe, in 2020, and then they kicked off the investment portion of the audit. That wrapped up in 2022, and we received a draft report from them a couple of months ago. And we submitted responses to that draft report, and we're waiting for them to schedule the exit conference and send us the final report of that audit. And then lastly, we have the administrative review by Millman. This is being done on behalf of the Controller's Office. They reported on part one, I believe in November. Part one covered our administrative procedures, and I believe there were 5 categories, and BERS passed in all.
First time ever.
Congratulations.
Most of the systems pass, well, police and fire don't pass all of them, everyone else does.
I just have to note that there's a lot of audits going on. I knew this, it's not a surprise to me, but weren't we first accused of not being audited at all or something crazy?
Yep.
I just have to
There's some
note that.
crazy stuff out there, correct?
But again, I think addressing it is important because as we sit here, we have the information, but everybody doesn't. And so goes to the communication piece that we talked about, Sandy. So I'm just saying, as I look at this, and I know you guys do a great job, and I look at this, it's like, that's not.
Don't believe everything you read, especially if it's in the New York Post.
Don't believe your lying eyes.
Brains.
Or Cranes, or P&I.
Just wanted to put that on tape.
Echo that. Right.
All right, so my apologies here because these graphs are not updated in the packet. So if you would look on the screen, you have the more updated slides for you. So the first chart shows the findings that have been remediated since the last audit committee meeting. There's 12 of those that were fully remediated and 41 are still open. And the upcoming slides will go into some high-level detail regarding those items. And then the second chart just shows the remediation status from an overall standpoint. Around 51% of the high-risk findings are remediated, while 49 are open. And then 6 of the medium risk-rated findings, 67% are fully remediated, while around 33 are in the process of being remediated. Just to quickly touch on high-risk findings that were recently remediated. So physical access to the data centers and office spaces, that was an issue that we flagged in one of our IT audits. That has been remediated. Alarm systems were installed at both offices and both data centers. And it works because the alarm was triggered recently. We're happy to get alerts.
What's Sandy again?
And then IT conducted a review of their physical assets and the process of managing those. They're using fresh service and they made sure that all assets are now being logged and tracked. Formal user administration procedures were implemented in a couple of our systems. So NetSuite, CPMS already had this in place, but we recommended some improvements there. And then Kofax, which is a system by which documents are scanned in, also had a process implemented. And then one of the big ones is the unclaimed funds issue that came out of audit of outstanding checks. So BERS worked really hard on this one, and they've established an unclaimed funds database on the BERS website. So now individuals are able to go on the website and do a search to see if there are any funds to which they're entitled. Overtime records are now being reviewed on a quarterly basis, and the IT department has finished drafting their change management policy and implemented the process for change management. Is there any questions here?
So for the open unaddressed, do you track whether those are past the date that managers said they would have it corrected?
Yes, I do. And I will report somewhat on that coming up. But
Okay.
the thing is, when we have the due dates and they're approaching, we usually will approach the managers and say, you know, to reevaluate that date to see if it's still reasonable. And more often than not, we'll get an updated. So it's kind of like a moving target.
Extended target date. Okay, yeah, then it's not really valid. Okay, thanks.
Right, so this, the third chart here, chart number 3, shows the distribution of those open findings. What we did here was kind of group the findings into operational areas. So we have benefits, compliance, customer service, and those sort of like broad buckets that we drop them into, just to kind of give a broad perspective of where things are in the different areas. So majority of the open high-risk findings are split between benefits, compliance, and IT. And majority of the moderate risk findings are split between fiscal ops, HR, and IT. Just to touch on some of the high-risk findings that are still open. So for the variable annuity fund, the education law, I believe is the RSSL or another law requires that there's a contract between BERS and the administrator of those funds. And BERS is actively working on that. There hasn't been one since time immemorial, so.
We don't think there ever was one. We
Yeah.
never found-
Administrator's TRS, isn't it?
TRS, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's being worked on. Update on the timelines will be on the next slide. As far as manual reporting process, that's hinging on CPMS. There are reports that were provided for testing, and there were issues back and forth. I know Fiscal Ops has been working on getting those cleaned up so that they can rely on those reports. Procurement was sort of held back because the department was changing and a new director responsible for that was hired last summer. And I know that they are actively working on building their processes and procedures. SCP cash account cleanup is queued up. I believe they recently kicked off the project. Actually, they were working on another big project, cleaning up the loans portfolio, and then they moved on to SCP cleanup. And just to jump around here, velocity post implementation review. This was something that we recommended a while ago. And it's still queued up.
Velocity posts.
So, you know, as with every big implementation, you want to take a look back and make sure that the requirements match what was delivered. Were there any lessons learned? What are we taking from this moving forward? And recommended that they do that for the upgrade.
Yeah, it's complicated by the fact that, so when CPMS was brought live May 2017, we did a systematic look back, lessons learned, all that stuff, because we did have problems with CPMS. There was the original definition of the systems and the specs were wrong in many cases. So velocity is different. That's more of an agile implementation. We're constantly updating the system with changes. So, you know, we just have to decide, okay, we're going to stop now and then look back, because we probably have another 2 years of planned system improvements in JIRA that will basically keep marching out the system. As a matter of fact, we're probably going to present one of the alternatives that Vitek has proposed to us, which is a new upgrade as a service where we get all upgrades automatically and pay them a fee. So
So Vitek's handling velocity as well as CPMS.
Vitek is CPMS contractor and Velocity contractor. They are functionally the same thing.
On the agreement with TRS, is that the law department playing, like going between, or are you guys actually doing it? Are you trying to do it outside of that?
That's a really complicated question.
That's why I'm asking, because like, so part of me thinks it would just be easier to let the lawyers hash out what
Yeah,
fits in
except
the
the
ad code and then back yourself out, you know?
What we're supposed to do is do a procurement every 5 years. We're supposed to evaluate the contract and do a procurement every 5 years. That's never been done. The procurement is complicated by the very weird legal structure of that system and the weird provisions of the variable specifically.
Yeah, I'm familiar, unfortunately.
Provisions,
Yeah.
the difference between what TRS thinks our values are and there's.
Yeah, no, I'm
And so
familiar with, with the historical.
Yeah, we're trying to.
Because I almost think that that's the lawyers rather than it's the systems at that point. I mean, I don't know, I'm just asking if that was.
I would agree, but they don't contract.
I'm just curious.
It's one of the last great mysteries of BERS, the variable annuity fund.
So this
That's why it's variable.
Yeah, so this is the last chart and it just shows from an overall perspective, what the remediation status, looks like. It kind of speaks to what you were asking about, Sandy. So just looking at the high risk finding, just over half have been fully remediated, while remediation is yet to start on around 14%. But just to note that this is often a moving target, so when we reach out to follow up, we usually have updated target dates from the directors. And then as far as timelines, we're just talking about the variable. We hope to have that draft by June of this year. Procurement framework, policies, procedures, July 2024 is the target date.
And we do, it's not like we don't have a procurement framework. We're just trying to design our own. We're currently, I forget the name. What's the name of the program we use?
We have PPB rules. directives. Yeah, we just don't have our framework that's tailored directly to BERS, so we will develop, pull from different. And then as far as manual financial reporting, the plan is to have those in CPMS by June of this year. And then for offsite backup options, I know ITA is trying to get a cloud-based vendor, but they don't have a timeline as to when that procurement will be completed. And the same goes for privileged access management. They don't have a timeline as to when that will.
Let me assure everyone, we do have backups through AWS, and we have administrative system backups linked between 65 Court Street, at Hohokus, what's the name of the place over there? Jersey and here, Weehawken and Jersey and here. So we have a pretty stable system when
Do
it
you have
comes
a
to.
physical plant, Sandy, or no? Like in the event, like, because this building during, I think it was Sandy, was shut down and TRS rented the backup site that NYCBERS has in Queens. So I was just wondering, do you get to go to the city in Staten Island? They have whatever the command center is in Staten Island?
Ended that because our group plan is basically work from home.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
We actually adopted that. We finalized that and adopted it.
Yes, we did in the
Yeah.
current version, but that's also being updated currently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair in the modern times, so I was just curious if.
Yeah, we don't have that expenditure. One of the few we don't have.
I'll note that.
All right, so risk assessment results and internal audit plan. So we recently concluded the annual risk assessment, and I just want to quickly share the 8 areas that deemed high risk. Just for a quick background, so in the risk assessment process, we review key processes and we identify risks, assess the risk. And when I say risk here, I'm talking about the inherent risk in the process, so absent internal controls in place. We also consider the organizational goals and objectives and the impact that these risks will have on achieving those goals. And some of the risk and impact areas that we considered were operational risk, reputational risk, financial risk, human resources, and the risk of fraud exposure. And then based on these high risk areas, we developed the internal audit activities that are included in the internal audit plan. And our goal is usually to provide coverage for the areas that are auditable. And then we report on those areas back to management. In the full report that you have in your packets, I do list out key considerations and areas and processes that are covered under each risk category. So I'm just going to quickly talk about each of the 8 areas. So first one is cybersecurity. So as we all know, cybersecurity is top on the list as it has been in recent years. And the threat landscape is ever growing and evolving. And cybersecurity attacks are growing in sophistication, and they are targeting data and systems. And the effects of those attacks can be crippling and costly. So our recommendation is just for management to continue their investment in, robust cybersecurity measures, including employee training. And employee training is key because humans are often like our test link when it comes to these things. So we really want to make sure that employee awareness is top on the list. Other things that we would like to see are improved cyber hygiene and vigilant monitoring. But we do know here that our IT environment is largely supported by the DOE's IT department, and there are constraints on what BERS is able to do independently. So the second area is human capital. One of the organizational goals of BERS is developing and supporting a culture of workforce excellence and promoting a positive environment. So although people are usually the organization's greatest assets, human vulnerabilities can also be a point that I just said. So issues like employee dissatisfaction, skill gaps, turnover, and things like that can disrupt operations and have an impact on employee morale. So our recommendation here is that BERS should continue prioritizing its culture of engagement. We've seen in recent years that there have been campaigns to kind of transform the culture of BERS and just move towards a more progressive and inclusive and dynamic environment for the employees. The third area is systems and data integrity. We talked about this briefly earlier. Ensuring systems and data integrity is another goal of BERS, and these goals are listed on the BERS website, if anyone would like to take a look. The accuracy and reliability of our systems and data are fundamental to the success of operations. And when we have things like incomplete or inaccurate data systems, it impacts the ability to serve members effectively. And this can in turn damage our reputation with the members and breed distrust. So our recommendation here is to just continue prioritizing system upgrades and improvement, continue with the data cleanup and preservation, and establish clear protocols for data governance. So things like access control, records retention rules, and data classification rules, and things like that will usually help in ensuring the integrity of data systems. The fourth area is governance and oversight. This is a large bucket that will also include areas that we're not able to directly perform audits on. And so we rely on effective management and oversight by management. We also want management to, pay close attention to the control environment. And again, the control environment really is a term that refers to the people. So we want to make sure that there's adequate and proper governance over the control environment and the internal controls, and that policies are clear and able to be easily followed by employees, and that there's adequate oversight over the processes that are ongoing. The fifth one is member experience. And again, this is another one of BERS's goals. And ultimately, the successful achievement of this goal hinges on delivering a seamless positive experience for the members. So in instances where there are inaccurate communications or processes are inefficient, or the members don't have the support that they need from us, it could breed distrust between us and the members, and they will be shortchanged. For a majority of our members, their pension will be one of the largest investments that they have over their lifetime. So we have to prioritize customer service, continue to improve and streamline those processes that especially will impact the members directly. The next area here is, skip ahead. The next area here is investments. This is one of BERS's goals under execution excellence. And BERS's objective here as it relates to investments is to achieve a return greater than or equal to the actual assumption to enable BERS pay all current and future earned benefits. So this has a direct impact on our members also. And the effectiveness and timeliness of investment decisions will directly impact the ability for BERS to meet this objective. So we know that that's top of mind for management, but we just also want to issue a reminder. When it comes to disbursements and benefits payments, these also directly impact the members, and ensuring that disbursements are accurate and benefit payments are timely and accurate speaks directly to the financial stability and security of the members. And again, this is one of BERS's goals under the pillar of execution excellence. In fact, BERS's mission is securing your financial future today. So this is directly correlated to that. When there are inaccurate or inefficient processes, the members' financial security is threatened. So our recommendation here is to ensure that processes are efficient, communications are accurate, and that there are fraud prevention measures in place. Lastly is compliance. So just by nature of BERS's business as a retirement system, there is a long list of regulatory frameworks and laws that BERS has to abide by. You have the Internal Revenue Code, Education Law, Retirement and Social Security Law, and then you have the rules and regs of BERS, just to mention a few. So BERS has to continue to keep in mind, top of mind, that non-compliance can be problematic, can impact BERS's reputation, can lead to fines, and can also impact operations. So those are the 8 areas that we identified in our risk assessment, and a majority of those led directly into our internal audit plan. Are there any questions before I talk briefly about the audits that we have planned?
We have bylaws. We don't have rules and regulations that go along with the bylaws, right?
So the bylaws are for the Board of Trustees.
Oh,
And then we have
there's
some
internal
regulations
bylaws.
for operation.
Gotcha, okay.
There is a document called the BERS Rules and Regulations, but it is not equivalent to the rules and regulations that other systems have. It's a different thing. There is also another document that are the rules and regulations for personnel. So you have different things going by the same name.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thanks for leaving the confusion.
So the audit plan that we developed based on this risk assessment covers 2024, 2025, and 2026. The full reports are in your packets. The full report is in your packet. And on the screen I have here just the audit plan for this year. So the first one is enrollment processing. So we want to look at the processes by which members are enrolled into the QPP and the TDA. And we want to evaluate the controls, the internal controls around those processes, because the plan that they are enrolled into can have a direct impact on what they work out with. retirement. So we want to make sure that they're in the right plan and their contribution rates are accurate and things like that. Next, we'll look at debt benefits processing, and within this, we will look at QPP debt benefits and TDA debt benefits. We'll look at the controls in place that are ensuring that these calculations are accurate and timely. And then we'll look at SCP, service credit purchasing. This is a group of processes that includes prior service buyback and military service buyback. So when a member joins BERS, hopefully going forward, we'll have less of this with the auto enrollment bill. But there are members who do not join BERS when they become eligible to join. And as such, they'll have to buy that back as prior service. And then we also have members who have served in the military and they're wanting to buy back that service. So we're going to look at the internal controls around these processes as well. We will also then move on to TDA, so tax deferred annuity program. We're going to look at the contribution rates and the investment changes. So last year we looked at the refunds, that TDA refunds. So this year we're going to look at the rates and the elections. Information security audit. This is an IT audit that we plan to do again this year. We did the last one, I believe, 2 years ago. And this is one that we will need third-party services for. As you know, we're rolling off of Baker Tilly and we are transitioning in-house. So we don't have IT auditors on staff and we'll have to retain third-party services for that.
Will that be encompassed with the cybersecurity audit that you mentioned in the previous slide?
That's a separate audit that's solely focused on MSS.
And is that a third party as well, or?
Yes. Well, we have Baker Tilly currently working on that.
Okay.
And then lastly, we have pension payroll processing. So this is the process by which retirees are getting their benefits paid out to them. We're going to look at those processes, make sure that the payments are accurate, timely, and that the survivors, the beneficiaries are on process timely on payroll, and just generally look at the internal controls around all of those processes.
You guys send out a proof of life, like 85 or 80, or is it 80?
Yeah, 85.
85, and then we get the proof of life and send it back out.
And I believe they're currently updating that process now in response to last controller's audit.
Yeah.
Acquire any new deathmatch database, which has been a challenge.
I think it's across the system, so I think that's pretty.
Chair, just for the minutes, both trustees Faulkner and Nesbitt.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I have that note.
Oh,
So coming up will be the approval of the internal audit plan. So if there are no other questions on the audit plan. So my slide is up here. We go. That's everything I have for you today.
anybody have any other questions? Thank you, Uday. Like Tony mentioned, for the record, Greg Faulkner's here and Donald Nesbitt is here. The next item on the agenda is agenda item number 5, approval of the internal audit plan. And I have a motion to consider. Can Tony approve, being that Greg's here?
I'm Tom's alternate.
You're Tom. All right, so Tony and,
Yeah, I'm Alan's alternate, so I'll second him.
okay. Second from John.
I'm Alan's, right?
Allison is Alan's alternate.
Allison's Alan's, so like, if Kareem needs to do it, that's fine.
Second.
Second from Kareem, thank you. The 3-year rolling internal audit plan presented to us by the internal audit director contains planned assurance and consulting engagements for the calendar years 2024, 2025, and 2026. Any material changes to the planned activities and or resources for the department may result in revisions to the plan. Significant changes will be communicated to the audit committee and senior management by the internal audit director. Are there any questions? Okay, let's vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. In favor?
Favor. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item number 6, committee discussion. And I have a motion to consider. From Tony, and a second.
can do it, I'll second it.
A second from Greg. Are there any issues regarding what we discussed here today that need to be discussed further? And does anyone have any additional questions? Seeing none, just as a reminder, we're gonna be voting on a new committee in the trustees. I hope that everybody volunteers again. I know I will be. Yeah,
So nice of you, so nice of you.
Sounded very.
okay, that,
Thank you, John.
no problem. That concludes the agenda for this meeting. The next meeting of the audit committee for BERS will be held in the second quarter of 2024, yet to be scheduled and communicated to all the committee members and invitees. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So,
Thank you, Corinne. Have a second? Tony?
Second.
All those in favor?
aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.